Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a ton to discuss. This is going to be a super busy episode. We've got a lot of games to discuss. We got 2 basketball games and a football game to discuss. So I'm going to try to get through all the content as quickly as possible. I will, of course, break out all the episodes into their separate sections. If you only have time to listen to a part of it, feel free to do so. But going to go ahead and get this recorded because I know there's a lot of information on the Alabama athletics front. A couple of quick housekeeping things I want to take care of here up at the top. First things first, if you are not subscribed to the channel, if you could do me a favor and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. I know about 75% of the people that watch these are not currently subscribed, so anything you could do to help me out there, I would really appreciate. Additionally, if you are not currently if you have not seen my website with barnesonbama.com or are not currently following me on Twitter, that's where I usually come out with our pregame threads. Unfortunately, I was not able to come out with one before the Clemson game. Really, really sorry about that. I've had a lot of stuff coming up with me and my fiance are getting married, and there's just been a lot of stuff on my plate over the last day or so. And I tried to get it written in advance, and it's just been a really busy last week or so. But I promise I will have one out for the UTSA game, and I promise to have one out for the rest of the games in the future. Like I said, this one with the holidays and everything piled together, the Clemson game unfortunately did not happen. However, like I said, we are going to break down the game. We're going to talk about everything that you need to know about the game today. We're also going to break down the UTSA game as well as the Georgia game, and then we'll get out of here. Last but certainly not least, if you hear any ads on Apple or Spotify, that is because I am a part of the Believe Podcast Network, as you'll see. And anything you can do to help out those sponsors, we would appreciate. But let's jump right into the coverage because there's a lot of stuff to discuss. First things first, Alabama played Clemson last night in basketball, and they won by a score of 90-84. And the score tells, part of the story, but does not tell what this game really was. First things first, Alabama was missing multiple players in this game. Aiden Holloway was announced right before the start of the game that he was going to be missing due to a wrist injury. We knew that Latrell Wrightsell, Keaton Bristow, and Jalil Bethea were all going to be day to day. I had mentioned over a month ago that I thought that Jalil Bethea was going to come back for this game. He did actually play in this game. We'll talk a little bit about him later. He only played 5 minutes, but he did play in this game. However, Latrell Wrightsell and Keaton Bristow did not play in this game, so that meant Alabama was down 4 scholarship players with Aiden, Trelly, Keaton, as well as Collins. So they were down 4 scholarship guys in this game, plus Jalil Bethea, obviously on the minutes restriction, and then Noah Williamson played, but was just ineffective as he has been at multiple times this season. So Alabama really only had about a 7-man rotation in this one due to the injuries and such. I will say the 7-man rotation, you did see a lot out of the freshmen, and I want to talk a lot about those guys because I think that you've seen the freshmen really growing up before your eyes. Namely, Amari Allen is the guy that gets the start. This is his second start of the year. He started the first game of the season with Latrell Wrightsell and those guys that were out. But Amari Allen starts. He gets a double-double with 20 and 11. It adds to it 4 assists, has a block, has some of the most important moments in this game, has a huge rip away steal, slash rebound that was just absolutely incredible. Really was super efficient with the basketball in his hands. Finished, 6 of 9 from inside the arc, shot just 1 of 4 outside the arc. He's a better shooter than that, but, on the season has been a 40% guy. But really, what he gives you at 6'8" is it gives you a guard that 6'8" can really rebound the basketball. And when he rebounds the basketball with those 7 defensive rebounds, he can really run in transition, right? We've talked about that kind of all season. Him getting the basketball and being able to move with it is just a huge deal. He had to be another primary ball handler in this game because of the injuries that we just discussed with Aiden and Trelly. So Amari was your backup ball handler behind LeBaron Philon. He played 36 minutes in this game. He played a huge amount in this game. He looked great doing it. Again, he's somebody that I think just commands massive minutes, partially due to his ability to handle the basketball, partially due to the tough plays that he gives you, but then also just the rebounding, what he gives you from a rebounding perspective, and his ability to mostly guard 1 through 4 at a minimum, and he can swap onto the 5 and has the physicality to at least handle him for a minute. He really gives you a lot of strength and a lot of size at that guard position. He's awesome on the floor. And I think that he, had one of his best games in an Alabama uniform. His double double, definitely one of, you could definitely argue his best game in an Alabama uniform with the double double. The other guys, that I thought that really stepped up when you're talking about the freshmen, at least, is London Jemison, right? This is his third game in a row scoring double figures. London Jemison has just continued to give you more and more, um, on the basketball floor, right? He scores 13 points in this game. He adds 2 rebounds. Not his best rebounding game by any stretch, but he had 2 steals as well. He was a sniper from the corner. He is 3 of 6 from three, and that was really something that I think is the part of his game where he's continually gotten better and better. If I look at his stats, he opened the season 1 of 6 against North Dakota and 0 of 3 against Purdue. And since then, he went 2 of 2 against Gonzaga, 2 of 3 against UNLV, 1 of 3 against Maryland, and then 3 of 6 in this game against Clemson, right? So he's got his 3 point percentage up to 39% on the season after a really slow start. And that's really, do I think that he's going to be a lifetime 40% guy? Maybe not, but I think that he's a high 30s guy. And having a guy like that can really play that defense, that has the body size at that 6'7", 6'8". He doesn't have quite the size on him that a guy like Amari Allen. I know they're listed at the same weight, but I think Amari's got a little bit more physicality to him than London does. But both of those guys, their ability to play the four, their ability to really get physical down low if they need to, just gives us a lot, right? Like I said, I think currently Amari has a little bit more rebounding to his game than London, but I really like what I've seen out of London here recently. He moves great with the ball in his hands. Again, he was a sniper in the corner in this game, and I think that him additionally coming on as a shooter just gives us so much to this offense, right? It really goes to what we talked about all offseason, that you're not putting a guy on the floor that can't shoot the 3 point basket, right? You're not putting a guy on the floor that you are not confident that can make the shot. And that's a huge deal when you're talking about Nate Oates' 5 out offense. When you truly have 5 guys that can shoot the basketball, it keeps the spacing much more spread out. And then when you have guys like LeBaron or guys like Aiden that are willing to back up even a little more, Trelly, that back up even behind that 3 point line to your NBA line or further, that also just helps your spacing and gives guys like Amari Allen or even London Jemison, when they're doing back cuts, gives them the ability to work in space. And I think that helps you so much for this team. The other guy, that I feel like you have to mention before we even talk about LeBaron, and LeBaron ties for his career high, just to tell you how great some people played in this game. Aiden Sherrill. Aiden Sherrill had just 5 points, so some people are going to look at this as, why are you pointing out Aiden Sherrill? It's pretty simple. Aiden Sherrill had 5 points. He had 10 rebounds, however, but had 8 blocks. Last season he has just 7 blocks. Or yeah, last season he had, I believe it was 7 blocks. Um, and in this game he has um he has 8 blocks. Aiden Sherrill has just continuously, in my opinion, continuously gotten better and better and better at being a rebound. Sorry, at protecting the rim. It's something that game in and game out he has done better and better and better. He's also continuously done better at making sure that he's not fouling. Right, that's something that he struggled with even earlier this season. Um, yeah, 7 blocks last season. And he had 8 in this game. So just absolutely incredible. The fact that Aiden is able to play the amount of minutes that he played in this one, he played 29 minutes. When you look at what Aiden Sherrill has done this season, in the Illinois game, he got 4 fouls and played just 9 minutes. Right? You look at the St. John's game, he has 4 fouls and he plays just 17 minutes. However, in that Gonzaga game, I thought that was probably one of his best games in an Alabama uniform. He did a huge job against Graham Ike, plays 30 minutes, has 14 points, has 4 offensive rebounds, was a really, really good game for him. The UNLV game, he played 12 minutes, but he got 8 rebounds, right? We didn't need him in that UNLV game, so it makes total sense. Against Payne for Maryland, goes 23 minutes, 9 rebounds, 5 blocks, just absolutely incredible. And the blocks is the other thing, right? Since that Illinois game, and that's the game that you kind of, it feels like the turning point for him. That Illinois game where he had 4 fouls in just 9 minutes. Since then, he's had 3 blocks, 1 block, 5 blocks, and 8 blocks, right? So you're talking 17 blocks in the last 4 games. He's got 21 blocks on the season. Has really turned into the rim protector that Alabama needs him to be, because Alabama, with the way our defense has played, is going to funnel some of those. We're not doing the same drop coverage that we've done in the past, but we're still funneling a lot of those guys down to your big man down low. And having Aiden Sherrill being able to be that rim protector and eraser just gives you so much more freedom on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that it's really going to help Alabama long term from a defensive perspective. Nate mentioned in the post game press conference that if Aiden, hits his free throws, that he has a double double and is 2 blocks shy of a triple double. Right. And that's a great thing, right? Aiden Sherrill is the one guy that unfortunately did not shoot the free throw super well last night. He goes 3 of 8 from the line. It's something that apparently he was working on in the gym even after the game. I'm sure he's super upset by that. A couple of his are he's kind of notorious on those free throws that they hit the rim a lot, and so he's sometimes, if he gets the shooter's roll, sometimes he'll get them to fall in, like that very first free throw he shot for the game. Bounced everywhere except the bottom of the net. And unfortunately, when you have a game like that, you're just going to have some poor shooting nights. So I'm sure that's something he's going to work on and try to get fixed, because he is a better shooter than that. You see that from his 3-point percentage and what he's able to do from behind the arc. So he has the shot capable of making his free throws. And, I'm sure he's disappointed with a night that's 3 for 8 from the line. And then, of course, your leader in LeBaron Philon, right? LeBaron Philon scores 29 points in this game. And I think the importance of LeBaron Philon scoring these points is, if you didn't watch this game, Alabama jumps out to a 19-point lead in the first 10 minutes of this game. And when you see the start of this game, Alabama starts 11 of 16 from the field. I believe it was 5 of 5 from the 3-point line. Alabama just was dominant to start this game. The ball was moving really well, and you knew eventually they were going to come back to the mean, right? You knew they weren't going to stay at that insane pace, but you were really excited to see it. Obviously, missing Aiden Holloway, missing those guys that we mentioned previously. The offense seemed to be flowing decently well. Part of that was because shots were falling, and part of that was just the team was playing really well. I thought the defense was playing really well as well. Then Clemson continuously tries to fight back. It's a 15-point game at halftime. Clemson really punches you in the mouth to start the second half. And then for the later parts of the second half, probably the last 10 minutes of the game, this really was a dogfight to the end. Clemson even takes the lead, and LeBaron Philon, clearly was just not going to let Alabama lose in this game. He hit a big three that put us up to, I believe, when they took the lead. He had multiple and ones. If Alabama needed a tough shot, LeBaron Philon went and got it. He was dominant in this game. It was his best free throw shooting performance of the season. He went 8 of 8 from the line, 3 of 7 from behind the arc. 6 of 10 from inside the arc. I think LeBaron Philon was the guy you need him to be. He had 3 assists, which I thought, he did a pretty good job distributing the rock. Nate talked about, he only had 2 turnovers in this game. One of them, he tried to hit Houston on a back cut, and unfortunately just got kind of caught up in traffic. The one thing that LeBaron did get into is he got in a little foul trouble, and so because of that, he only played 33 minutes. You did some swapping for him for Davion Hannah so that he wouldn't foul out of this one. And because of that, it caused him not to be able to play quite the same level of defense. Not that LeBaron is an elite defender, but he definitely has, decent on ball pressure, can come up with some steals, can cause some issues on the ball. And when he got the extra fouls, he just wasn't able to play the same level of defense that he's played for large stretches of the season. You don't love to see that. You hope that he can continuously, kind of fix that problem. But at the end of the day, LeBaron Philon did exactly what you needed to win this basketball game. He got you the big shots when you needed them. He really gave the energy to the team, and Alabama, willed themselves to a victory. Like I said, what looked to be a very easy win. Clemson did not give up. Credit to them. It's a really veteran team, really old team that we talked about. But Alabama was able to win this game, at the end. Then the other guys that I think, I haven't mentioned to this point that I want to mention before we talk about Jalil Bethea. Houston Millette, a guy, that I've talked a lot about on this program. He scores 10 points. He goes 3 of 6 from the 3-point line. One of the more timely threes of the game, I thought, was hit by Houston. Also, a huge offensive rebound kick out that allowed a Taylor Bowen three, which was his only assist and was probably the biggest play of the game. right when Alabama looked to be going down again. Houston gets a big offensive rebound, kicks it out to Taylor. You go up by 3 points, and it really helps you kind of go at arm's length in this game. Taylor, another guy that, Alabama brought him in as a big stretch four that could handle the basketball, that was an elite 3 point shooter, that could hand, like I said, could have the ball in his hands, had great ball skills. He's been that this season. The place where he has not been quite as good as we had expected has been he started the season a little slow shooting the three. I know in the past few games he's been 0 of 3, 1 of 4, 2 of 6. He didn't hasn't been shooting the ball super well. In this game, he goes 3 of 7 from the 3 point line. Really, really good to see that from Taylor. You knew it was going to happen. He shot 41% for the season last year at Florida State. You knew that with our offense and spacing, he was going to get those to continually drop. But, really good to see those out of Taylor. Like I said, a couple of really timely threes out of Taylor, which I thought was great. He did have 5 rebounds in 28 minutes. He had 3 assists. You would love to see him potentially, get a few extra rebounds. We saw what he's capable of in that St. John's game. Would love to continually see him give that effort so that he can, have those type of rebounding games in him. Would love to see him stay in that 5 plus per game range from a rebounding perspective. He definitely has this body, and the height to be able to do it. He just has to be physical with the basketball, and understand that at the end of the day, whoever's going for the ball the most physically and the most like I've got to have it. That's who's really generally going to get the basketball. He did get 2 blocks in this game. Obviously, having an additional rim protector is a huge deal. We didn't play him a ton at the small ball five today, but or yesterday, I guess. But obviously having him as an additional rim protector, either on backside or when he's playing small ball five, is a really big deal. So very, very excited to see that out of Taylor. He had a solid game. Probably not his best game in Crimson, but he had 11 points. He hit some big threes. Was a very solid game. Very happy with what we saw. Davion Hannah, from an offensive perspective, did not have a ton. He didn't score in this game. He missed his only three. He missed his couple of layups. However, he did have a block in this game. Again, as I mentioned earlier, he came in a good bit for LeBaron Philon to help make sure that LeBaron wasn't going to foul out. He's been solid on defense. We knew that his defense was much more ahead of his offense coming into this season, and that's continued to be the case. So I think that Davion Hannah has continuously done what you need him to do. He seems super physical and super capable, but was not his best game. It's okay. At the end of the day, you got really, really good games out of both other freshmen, and it ended up being completely fine. And then finally, the guy who we haven't talked about that I think does deserve a little bit of time. Like I said, he only played 6 minutes officially, but I thought that you saw a couple of really good things out of him in this game. Is Lil Bethea. In 6 minutes, Bethea had 3 rebounds. He had 2 points. And the points were actually off of an offensive rebound. He had 2 assists. When Bethea was in, the ball was moving really well. I thought that he was, moving to get the basketball and was showing the effort that it takes to actually come up with the basketball. So much of rebounding is about effort as much as it is height or physicality or anything else. And I thought that he did a really good job. That's why you see 3 rebounds in 6 minutes. I think that that was intentional. That offensive rebound was like just being in the right place at the right time and knowing what's going to happen. I thought that Bethea was really good getting the basketball, and if you can, as he continuously comes back, I think that you're going to see him a lot more in this UTSA game, and we'll talk about it next before we move on to football in Georgia. But I thought that Bethea did a really good job. I think that in this UTSA game, you're going to be able to see a lot more of him because I do suspect that Alabama's going to get out to a fairly significant lead. And if Bethea is able to play a lot more, I think he's going to be able to show you a little bit more what he has. He clearly is a guy who, has the talent, and I think that you started to see that if he continue with that level of intensity from a rebounding standpoint, he can give you something where it's like, hey, this guy's not just an elite offensive weapon, but he can really be a rebounder and other things for your team, which allows you to play him more and more. So really, really excited with what I saw out of Jalil Bethea. Obviously only 6 minutes of play, but think that there's some things that you can definitely take away from what you saw on the court with him this last game. Then I want to move over to our UTSA game. Alabama takes on UTSA on Sunday afternoon. This is a game where, for anybody unaware of why Alabama's playing this game, you may look at UTSA as like, this officially the second worst team we've played all season, behind North Dakota. Obviously, the North Dakota that we talked about early in the season that opened the season was the return trip from Grant Nelson previously. Pretty much all of the teams that we're playing to this point outside of Yale and then the SEC schedule have some reason why we're playing them. UTSA, Alabama's playing Austin Claunch, former assistant coach for Nate Oates a couple of seasons ago during the Final Four run. Obviously, this was Nate. I believe he tried to set it up last season, was unable to do so. So scheduling his former assistants is something Nate really loves to do. That's what you see in this game. Obviously, then you play Arizona in a huge matchup in Birmingham. Then you got South Florida and Brian Hodgson, Kennesaw State and Antoine Petway, and then that Yale game to round out the non-conference before you move into conference play. So this is one of Nate being able to schedule his former assistants. Obviously, something that he has done time in and time out. There's a positive and a negative when it comes to this. I think it's a positive for them because they're able to play a top team. It's obviously a good time for them to come back and see Nate. They can challenge themselves against a top, opponent, as well as for Nate, it's also, a fun challenge for him to go up against somebody who he's coached with and against. I will say when Alabama has played Brian Hodgson, and we'll talk about this more for the South Florida game, but this has been historically where Nate Oates has been challenged a little more than you may see with a team of this general stature, right? A team that UTSA is ranked 258th currently per KenPom. Obviously, it's still a little early, but that gives you an idea of where they're ranked in the country. For reference, UNLV that Alabama played in the tournament is ranked 139th right now. So this team is about 100 or so spots worse than UNLV. Not quite as bad as North Dakota. It's about another 80 spots worse. But this isn't the most highly ranked efficiency team in the country. But this is a team that has a lot of knowledge, or at least their coach has a lot of knowledge of Nate Oates and what the system is. So it gives them a couple of things, right? You know the type of defense that we're obviously going to try to run. You also know what Nate Oates is trying to do in his offensive philosophy. And that's something that you even notice when you're talking about an SEC schedule, right? When Alabama plays an opponent for the first time, right? When you have a new coach into the SEC and it's the first time they're playing Nate Oates, oftentimes that does not go super well for that new coach because Nate Oates' scheme is so different than what a lot of teams are going for, that it's just a very difficult scheme to go against on a fairly short schedule, right? Obviously knowing you have a couple of days to prepare, but even so, it's not the easiest team to prepare for, and you see that in March Madness, and you've seen that all the time. But playing a former assistant in UTSA, I think it should be a very good game for Alabama. UTSA this season has played South Alabama, Georgia Southern, Abilene Christian, Texas State, Denver. They only have two, or I guess, yeah, two wins inside of the top 220, or I guess I said that wrong. They have two wins of teams ranked inside of KenPom, with Georgia Southern at 223 and then Denver at 282. They have played some other better teams than that with Abilene Christian, South Alabama, Texas State, and such. They did lose all of those games. So this is a team that has a bigger win in Georgia Southern, but hasn't played their best competition as to this point, or their best level to this point. This is a much better defensive team than offensive team. To this point, they have struggled. I mean, the only way I can put it is they have struggled on offense. Currently, they have one player that has really led them from an offensive scoring output, and he has been really, really good. He has been by far their top player, Jameer Simpson. He's averaging 18.6 a game right now. He's the only guy on their team averaging over 10 points a game. He's shooting almost 40% from three. He is a really, really good player and has been great this season. However, the he is the only guy on their team shooting over 30% from three, right? And the reason why I mention that is important is this team currently takes about 47% of their shots from three-point land. So similarly, when I talked about the Maryland team in the Las Vegas tournament, I talked about Maryland shooting a lot of threes, but not particularly being great at them. Um, this UTSA team is very similar. They have a couple of guys. They have, more than, I guess they have four guys that have taken more than 28 attempts this season. Um, one of the guys who's taken 28 attempts has made just five. One of them has made just seven. Then we got 14 and 20 makes, right? So we got a 40% shooter, Jameer Simpson, that we talked about. Their next best shooter is Dorian Hayes at 28.6%. And then you got Brent Moss at 24%. And finally, Austin Nunez at just 17.9%, right? So all their guys that are taking shots, they're definitely, capable of making them. Austin wouldn't be letting them take them if he didn't think they could make them. However, they have not been the best shooting the 3-point shot, even though they do take quite a lot of shots from three. And generally, when you see a system like that, what I would suspect Nate Oates is going to do as somebody who plays a lot of the analytics, he's going to let some guys take some shots, right? Alabama is going to give up some open shots from three, I suspect, whether it be gambling on defense or whatever. I do suspect we're going to leave some people open, but what they're going to try to do as best as possible is not leave Jameer Simpson, right? They're going to try to not leave Jameer Simpson. And if somebody is going to go off in this game, it's not going to be your leading scorer. That's the guy that everyone should have circled when you're playing this UTSA team. Right. From an effective field goal percentage, they just have not been great this season, and it's because they have not shot well inside the arc or outside the arc. Right. They've had a lot of shots blocked. I do think this is going to be a game where Taylor Bowen, playing small ball five, should be able to have a fairly successful game with blocks. Obviously, Aiden Sherrill should have a big game. If Keaton Bristow plays in this one, I think he should have a solid game. Amari Allen, I think will be very, very important in this one. Even like London Jemison should be fairly important in this one because similar to most mid majors, they just don't have a big rotation, even if they're fairly they have a decent number of players. Like in the Georgia Southern game, they played um nine guys, sorry, eight guys more than 10 minutes, and they played 10 guys in that game. However, none of the guys that they played more than 10 minutes are over 6'9". So Amari Allen at 6'8", London Jemison at that 6'7", 6'8", are going to be near the tallest people they're going to be going up against. And even their 6'9" guy, it is fairly large, but he's not huge. So this is a situation where they're going to be undersized, as a lot of mid majors are. So oftentimes when Alabama plays against those mid majors like that, you do see a little bit more of playing small ball five, whether it be Taylor Bowen, whether it be Keaton Bristow. I do think that you are going to see some of those guys running out there as a small ball five in this game. It's very common when Alabama plays these mid majors. Amari Allen, especially if you have um, Aiden or Trelly or Bethea able to play more in this game, where Amari can slide a little further down. I do think that Amari will play, some 3-4 in this game. Maybe not quite as much of the two, not have to be quite as big as you were in the Clemson game. Because again, just the team you're going up against is going to be much smaller. So generally, when you play against those teams, it depends on how they defend you. Alabama has done it in both ways. If they try to come out on every 3-point shot, then Alabama just pounds the post and knows that there's no shot blockers and has a lot of success down low. If a team tries to say, hey, we're not going to let you get dribble penetration, then Alabama will just take as many threes as they need to and dominate the game from the outside. So it really depends on how these smaller teams defend Alabama. I've seen it done both ways. Um, Even with former assistants, I've seen it done both ways. So we'll be very curious to see how Austin Claunch kind of attacks this game. He's obviously a great coach. He was Alabama's, offensive coordinator, so to speak, when he was here. But like I said, early in this season, they have struggled from the offensive side of the basketball, and just have not been great to this point. So they will be looking to do better. The other place where I think that Alabama will have a lot of success, even though they have not been the best offensive rebounding team this year, UTSA is giving up a ton of offensive rebounds, and I think that Alabama, um, if they show the effort that they should be capable of, Alabama should be able to offensive rebound this game super well. Honestly, this score is going to be a pick your number for Alabama. I think that Alabama is going to probably score over 100 in this one. I think that Alabama will also be trying to flex their defensive muscle as much as they can. I think that this is going to be one where Nate Oates' goal for the game, whether he says it or not, it's going to be over 100 for our team and under 70 for the opposing team. So I'm going to look at this score as like 104-68 or something like that. Like I said, I think that realistically, that's kind of what you should think of this game as is a 100 plus for Alabama and a sub 70 for UTSA is kind of would be the goal. Realistically, could it be a closer game than that? Absolutely, right. Again, against a former assistant, I have seen things like that happen. However, I do think that if that ends up being the case, I think that UTSA is going to have to find some scoring from somewhere. And unless Jameer Simpson just goes off, and that maybe that is the case, maybe Jameer Simpson, the senior, just plays absolutely out of his mind, shoots what he's capable of. He's a 40% guy, as we mentioned. Maybe has a phenomenal game and does awesome in Coleman Coliseum. Great. Then maybe this is a closer game. However, if he does not, if Alabama is able to either lock him up or really give him some type of troubles, then I am curious where the scoring is going to come from. Because again, when you're talking about a team in UTSA that has, a lot of guys that are in that 8 point, 7 point a game range, 5 to 6 guys that are in that 7 to 8 point a game range. That's obviously a team that has the capability of scoring. But it was similar to that Clemson game that we just previewed and just, broke down what happened. The same thing I was concerned about in that game where you had a lot of people on the team that were capable of scoring, but the question was who was going to be the guy that stepped up. It really felt like early in that game when Alabama took the lead, Clemson did not have a go-to guy that they felt like could get them a bucket. UTSA, however, does have that guy in Jameer Simpson, so I think that they at least are a little bit more positive from that point. I think Simpson can be the guy that gets you a bucket. I'm just not sure of who's going to be the additional buckets, right? If Simpson gives you, even if he gives you 25, I just don't know where you're going to get the rest of your scoring from, and that's what scares me. If you're a smaller team like UTSA, going up against a giant like Alabama, I really am concerned from that perspective. So I do think that Alabama wins this game. I think this is a game that Alabama should win fairly easily. I do think that Jalil Bethea is going to get some additional run in this game. Would hope to see him maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes if possible. Not sure what his minutes restriction is going into this one, but I think 15, 20 minutes is totally reasonable. Would love to see him try to get into a real groove because, having him back potentially for the Arizona game would be a big one. But really just getting him back as quickly as possible is really kind of the goal for this season. So we'd love to see him get some additional run in this game. And finally, we're going to move to the SEC championship game. As I mentioned, we're moving to the SEC championship game, and that game is played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, where the Alabama Crimson Tide will take on the Georgia Bulldogs yet again. Obviously, we got here because Texas A&M lost to Texas, and that opened the door for Georgia to make the SEC championship game based on tiebreakers. Alabama obviously already held the tiebreaker as long as we beat Auburn. Alabama, is successfully able to beat Auburn and Jordan Hare, and that gets us to this SEC championship game for a rematch of a game that Alabama won earlier this season. And this is going to be a game of storylines, right? This is a game where Kirby Smart has been great in rematches. Alabama has never lost in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right? So it's really when you're talking about storylines, I think those are the two big ones, right? Kirby has been great facing a team for the second time, and Alabama really has been great in that Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Additionally, Kalen DeBoer has been incredible against the likes of Steve Sarkisian and Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart. Against the top of the coaching profession, he's been very, very good. And I think that's kind of the big thing that when you look at Kalen DeBoer is just his record against top head coaches. The thing that comes to mind when you're talking about, some people may point to the fact that they think that Georgia is a better team than Alabama in this game. And even if you believe that's the case, that what I would point to would be Washington's team the year before Kalen DeBoer comes to Alabama. That Washington team beat Oregon in the regular season, went on to face Oregon in the Pac 12 championship game, and beat Oregon again in the Pac-12 championship game before eventually losing. They beat Texas and then eventually lost in the national title game to Michigan. But they beat Oregon twice and Dan Lanning twice, and most people would suspect that they thought that Oregon was the better team than Washington in that one. Obviously, that Washington team had Michael Penix. It was an elite Washington team, but people still would argue that they felt that Oregon was the better team, was the more skilled team. I think that some people would clearly argue that Georgia may be better than Alabama. I think that it's at least up for argument on which team you think is better in this one. Obviously, the game that was played this season, Alabama won by a score of 24-21 in Athens. So I think that that's a data point that you obviously have to consider. The fact that Alabama won on the road in Athens in what, they snapped Georgia's winning record on the road or at home. Um, this was this is the biggest win in the country, in my opinion. The most impactful win in the country. The fact that Alabama snaps that winning streak, goes in and beats Georgia in Athens in a night game, just a phenomenal atmosphere, was a huge, huge game. The reason why, if we look at why did Alabama win the first one, so I think I want to talk about kind of what happened in that first game and what I think will change coming into this next game, and then my kind of predictions for this next matchup on Saturday. Part of the reason why Alabama had so much success in that first game was Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson goes 24 of 38. He throws for 276. He was nails on third down. He was 9 of 9 to start the game on third down. Alabama was just incredible on third down in this game. And it really was the difference maker. Alabama goes for it on fourth down to end the game and does the quick out to Jam Miller. And just absolutely was incredible. This was the first time you really saw the crispy package with throwing the ball to Caden Proctor down low, in the red zone that gets the first down, almost gets you a touchdown. I think this is also, just Alabama did not run the ball well in this game. They had 117 rushing yards. I think a lot of people would point to if Alabama, most people would think if Alabama was going to beat Georgia, they were going to have to be able to run the ball in some type of facet. And Alabama just didn't, right? Alabama running the football was not great in this game, as they were most of the season. They were not great. And I think the reason I point that out is Alabama has gotten better from rushing the football. However, you're very likely going to be without Jam Miller in this game, obviously due to the ankle injury that you saw in that Auburn game. Additionally, Parker Brailsford is still questionable. And even if he does play, he's going to be on 1 foot. He hasn't been quite the person that he was on 2 feet. If you're curious about what I mean by that, check out Brooks Austin, the Film Guide Network. He did a really, really good breakdown of the Alabama Auburn game and kind of pointed out some of Parker's roles and stuff. And he's clearly on one tire, as he calls it. You may see Geno Vandermark playing center at least some in this game. Not to say that Georgia isn't also without their center, and we'll talk about some of the injuries here in a minute. But I think that there's some things like that you have to kind of point out when you're talking about Alabama, especially because having Kevin Riley missing in this one, having Jam Miller missing in this one, the running back room for Alabama is one that obviously has played all season, but it is banged up. So we'll be curious to see what happens in this Georgia game. Ty Simpson will have to be elite, in my opinion, in this game again. Alabama went 13 of 19 in this game, or in the first game on third down. Georgia made them walk it down the field. Alabama forced Georgia to just 2 and 8 on third downs, right? Alabama even forced Georgia to walk it down the field. I thought that in general, Alabama did a really good job in that game. The one place where Alabama did struggle in that game is they gave up some decent runs. Colby Young had a 38-yard reception in that game. But then even running the football, Alabama gave up two 43-yard runs in that game, one to Dylan Bell, the receiver, and one to Chauncey Bowens, the running back. They gave up some explosive runs. Nate Frazier even had a 24-yard run. Gunnar Stockton had a 20-yard run, right? So you had four guys that gave up that had 20-plus yard runs. And that was really the place where Georgia had a lot of success was on the ground. I think that Alabama this season has definitely grown stopping the run. You will be without LT Overton in this game. You will be without Kelby Collins in this game. However, you will have Tim Keenan at full strength in this game. And the reason I mention that is Tim Keenan was The first game back that he played was the Georgia game. This was not Tim Keenan at been playing all season, fully ramped and ready to go. This was Tim Keenan, again, first game back. And as I mentioned previously, Georgia will be without their center, and Tim Keenan will be going up against a center with his first time start. So that will definitely be a matchup to watch, especially when you're talking about running the football. So because I think that Keenan can really do a lot of disruption in the inside, um, blowing up the run. Additionally, you are going to have Quay Russaw in this game. You did see him in the Auburn game, but you're going to have Quay Russaw and Yanze Pierre from a pass rush perspective. So even though you're going to be missing LT Overton, you have Quay Russaw back, so the pass rush still should be very, very good in this game. Um, Stopping the run is the spot where Alabama is going to have to grow from what they did in game one, right? Georgia just killed you on the ground. I think the Alabama zone defense that they have played the pass against all season has done a very good job. Obviously, we gave up a couple of busted plays to Auburn. However, I think that in general, Alabama's zone defense has forced those quarterbacks to make the throws, to force the checkdowns, to walk it down the field. Georgia did the same to us. I'm curious to see what type of coverage changes they do in this game, whether it's changing a lot of stuff pre-snap or what they do, because obviously you cannot let Ty Simpson be as comfortable as he was in the game in Athens, right? He looked like he was going to the park and throwing football with his dad, right? He was just absolutely dominant in that game, and Ty Simpson was the reason why Alabama won that game. When you look at what I think Alabama is going to have to, contend with, somebody who had a huge game, or somebody who had definitely an impactful game in that first one, was Josh Cuevas. Obviously, he's a big guy for blocking on the run. He's also been a good job, done a good job catching the football at the tight end position. He's still uncertain if he's going to be playing in this game. He missed the Auburn game, and Alabama clearly missed him in that Auburn game. If he does not play, you're looking at Caleb Edwards and Marshall Pritchett to come in and play the tight end position. Two freshmen that I think definitely have the skill talent and the ability to do very well, but you'll be missing Josh Cuevas. He's a guy who has a lot of experience in Kalen DeBoer's offense. He played in Washington with Kalen. He's been really, really good all season, and Josh Cuevas has been absolutely dynamite catching the football. I think he's been one of your brightest spots on the offense, right? So missing him, the question be, you need one of the freshmen to step up, right? When you look at the receivers, Jeremy Bernard had 5 catches for 35 yards. He had a touchdown. Isaiah Horton had a huge game against Georgia. You're going to need your star receivers to step up, right? Ryan Williams had 5 catches in that game. All the guys that step up, you're going to need them all to step up for this Georgia game, because, again, I think that Ty Simpson is going to be having different things thrown at him than what he saw in that first game, because that first game he was super comfortable. He was picking the team apart, and Kirby was clearly flustered, right? Ty Simpson was able to do whatever he wanted to do with the football, and Ty was having absolute control of that game. I think that Georgia's going to try to do whatever they can do to mix it up on him. If Alabama can help establish some of the run, that would be a huge deal. Um, Obviously, Georgia is a team that Alabama has not been able to, that hardly anyone has been able to run on, much less Alabama. So them being able to run on them isn't something that I would particularly hold my breath for. But I do think that if Alabama can get a little bit of the run established, that will additionally help. I think that this is a game where it's going to be a defensive slugfest. Quite frankly, it is going to be a defensive slugfest. When you're talking about kickers, um, I think that clearly Georgia has the better kicker in this game. However, I want to give Connor Talty the shout out that he hit 2 of the biggest kicks of his life in that Iron Bowl in Jordan Hare Stadium. That place is absolutely voodoo. We've talked about it for a long time, and hitting 2 major kicks that ended up being part of the difference of that game in Jordan Hare Stadium was a huge deal. So credit to him. Obviously, you're going to be at least kicking inside a dome, so wind will not be a factor. So potentially, he's capable of hitting the kicks. If this comes down to a kick, every Alabama fan I know is going to be terrified. I think Georgia has a kicker they trust in a little more. But obviously, Connor Talty, the fact that he gets booed off the field on Eastern Illinois and then comes out and hits the kicks that he did against Auburn was really cool to see. Really like to see that out of him. But like I said, this is one where I don't think that Alabama fans want this to turn into a kicking contest, whether he made those kicks or not, right? Alabama only got 2 sacks in their original game. Alabama gave up just 1 sack. Again, that's another question of can both teams make sure that they take care of the football? I think that obviously Alabama forces the fumble against Georgia, and Nate Frazier fumbles the football. Deontay Lawson recovers it. Huge game. And I think that the question is going to come down to, as most of these games are, right? This is going to be a field position game. This is going to be a penalties game. This is going to be a turnovers game. This is going to be a defensive slugfest, right? I really think that that score of 24-21, 21-17, that type of, low scoring, couple of touchdowns for each team, but really defensive slugfest affair is what you're going to see in this one. I think that honestly, um, because Alabama has not, uh, because Georgia has not been able to beat Alabama, I'm going to pick Alabama in this one, for no other reason than Alabama won in Athens, right? Do I think that Georgia is playing super well? Yeah, right. Or would most of the stats say Georgia probably should win this game? Yeah, probably. However, when you look at the fact that Alabama has done really, really well against Georgia recently, and when you also look at the fact that Alabama has won in that Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and when I also look at the fact that Kalen DeBoer, it feels like he did this against Dan Lanning, right? When he did this against Dan Lanning right before we hired him, most people expected that that win against Oregon in the regular season was semi a fluke. I think some people were like, "Oh, that was kind of a fluky win." I think there were a lot of turnovers in that game, if I remember correctly. And then he wins in the conference championship game, and it's like, well, maybe Washington's legit, right? I think that that's what you're really looking at. Obviously, you don't think that the Alabama win over Georgia and Athens was a fluke because it's the brand of Alabama, but I think that a lot of people would have argued Georgia was the better team going into that game. Obviously, Alabama had lost to Florida State. Alabama had much worse general thoughts about them than Georgia. I think that Alabama definitely has the ability to win this game, and I think that some people are looking at Alabama as like, oh no, they definitely can't win, but I do think that they can, right? I think that Ty Simpson will be able to step up in this one. Obviously, you're going to need him to step up in this game. He has not. He's missed a couple of deep shots recently. He's struggled at times recently, but I do think that he's going to be able to step up and be able to be successful. So we'll be very, very excited to see what happens in this Alabama Georgia game. I'm going to officially score it as I'm gonna go Alabama 21, Georgia 17. I'm gonna go Alabama 21, Georgia 17. So very, very similar to what happened in that first game. But I do think that honestly, a very similar to game to what we saw in the first one. Could this be a more high scoring affair? Sure, but I definitely don't suspect it. I think that both defenses are two of the best things on the field. And I think that this is going to come down to which quarterback can make the bigger plays. And I'm going to put my faith in Ty Simpson. I know that Gunnar Stockton has done really well this season, but I'm going to put my faith in Ty Simpson to be able to win this game and come out with an SEC championship and another or and a college football playoff berth for the University of Alabama. So very excited to see what's going to happen. I know this is going to be a really big game. Sorry for the really long episode. I know I had a lot of stuff to discuss. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.